My name is Starter, and I was about to die. The Sahara Desert wasn't just hot. It was a living, breathing furnace that wanted me gone. My canteen had been empty for 2 days. My lips were cracked and bleeding, and my tongue felt like a swollen piece of leather in my mouth. Every step was a monumental effort, a negotiation with my own screaming muscles. The sun beat down on me like a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil, forging my body into something brittle and broken. I stumbled, my vision blurring into a haze of shimmering gold sand and blinding white sky. This was it, the end of the line for a guy who just wanted a little adventure. I had come to the Sahara seeking something profound, a break from my mundane life back in the States. I wanted to feel the raw power of nature, to test my limits. Well, I'd certainly found them. My limits were apparently somewhere back by that last dried-up oasis, laughing at me. My trusty GPS had died, my satellite phone was a useless brick, and my sense of direction had evaporated along with the last of my water. All I had left was the grit in my teeth and the stubborn refusal to just lie down and let the vultures have their dinner. But even that was fading fast. The desert didn't care about my stubbornness, it was patient. It had all the time in the world. My thoughts drifted to my friends back home. Junior with his booming laugh and terrible jokes. Lacey, who could probably build a solar-powered sand sled out of spare parts if she were here. Max, the quiet, steady one, and Smoke, who was as unpredictable as a dust devil. I imagined them sitting around a table, probably wondering why I hadn't checked in. A pang of regret, sharp and painful, cut through the fog of my dehydration. I shouldn't have come alone. I should have listened to their warnings. But I was always the one who had to push things, to see what was over the next dune. Now it seemed, the only thing over this next dune was oblivion. My knees finally gave out. I collapsed onto the scorching sand, the heat searing through my clothes. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. I closed my eyes, the darkness behind my eyelids a welcome relief from the relentless glare of the sun. This was a pretty pathetic way to go out, I thought. No epic last words, no dramatic final scene, just a guy from America becoming another anonymous skeleton for the desert to claim. But then, as my consciousness began to slip away, I saw it. A faint, shimmering light on the horizon. It wasn't the sun, it was something else, something strange, and it was getting closer. The light pulsed, a soft, ethereal glow that seemed out of place in this harsh landscape. It was a beacon of impossible hope. I tried to push myself up, to crawl toward it, but my limbs refused to obey. My body was done. My spirit, however, clung to that strange light like a lifeline. It grew brighter, closer, until it was hovering just above me. It wasn't a mirage. Mirages don't hum with a low, melodic energy that vibrates through your bones. Then the most impossible thing of all happened. A hand, formed from the shimmering light itself, reached down toward me. It was beckoning, its fingers gently curling in a gesture of invitation. Was I hallucinating? Absolutely. There was no other logical explanation. I was a man dying of thirst, my brain cooking inside my skull. Of course I was seeing things, but this hallucination felt different. It felt real. The light was warm, not scorching like the sun. It was comforting. I lifted my own trembling hand, my fingers barely twitching, trying to meet the apparition. As my fingertips brushed against the light, the world fell away. The sand beneath me gave way with a sudden, sickening lurch. I wasn't falling onto more sand. I was falling through it, as if the ground itself had turned to water. Darkness swallowed me whole. The sensation was one of weightlessness, a terrifying freefall into the unknown depths of the earth. The roar of shifting sand filled my ears, and then silence. A cold, profound silence. I braced for impact, for the crushing finality of hitting solid rock. Instead, I plunged into water. The shock of the cold was so intense it felt like a jolt of electricity. It was a baptism of ice and darkness, washing away the desert's heat and the fog of my delirium. The water was pure, clean, and tasted sweeter than anything I had ever known. I drank greedily, gulping it down, feeling it extinguish the fire in my throat and stomach. I surfaced, gasping for air, treading water in a subterranean pond. The only light came from a faint phosphorescent glow emanating from the water itself, casting eerie blue shadows on the cavern walls around me. The hole I had fallen through was gone, sealed over with solid sand as if it had never existed. I was trapped. I had traded one tomb for another, but I was alive. The water had saved me, pulling me from the brink of death. I didn't know how or why, but as I floated there in the glowing pool, I felt a strange new energy coursing through my veins. Something inside me had changed. The water wasn't just water. It was something more. As I clung to the rocky edge of the underground pond, my body stopped shivering. The water's strange energy was seeping into me, warming me from the inside out. My exhaustion vanished, replaced by a clarity of mind I hadn't felt in days, but it was more than that. My thoughts felt faster, sharper. Then the visions started. They weren't dreams or memories, they were flashes of things that hadn't happened yet. I saw myself slipping on a loose rock near the edge of the pool. I instinctively shifted my weight, and a moment later, the very rock I would have stepped on crumbled and fell into the water with a splash. It was like a switch had been flipped in my brain. I could see seconds into the future. Not the distant future, not lottery numbers or stock market crashes, but immediate, personal futures. I saw the path my hand would take to grab a ledge and the way the ledge would hold my weight. I saw a small trickle of water from a crack in the ceiling and knew exactly when and where the next drop would fall. It was disorienting, like having a dozen tiny movies playing in my head all at once, all showing me the next few moments of my life. It was overwhelming, but it was also incredible. I had gained an impossible gift. I experimented, focusing my mind. I thought about climbing out of the pool. Instantly, a series of branching possibilities flashed before my eyes. One path showed me slipping and falling back in. Another showed me finding a secure handhold. A third showed a different route entirely, one that was safer and more direct. I could see the consequences of my actions before I even made them. This wasn't just foresight, it was a tactical advantage, a survival tool more powerful than any knife or compass. The mysterious water hadn't just quenched my thirst, it had rewired my very perception of time. I pulled myself from the glowing pond, my clothes soaked but my body buzzing with newfound power. I felt strong, I felt clear. The desperate, dying man I had been just moments ago was gone. In his place was someone new, someone who could see the future. I looked around the vast, dark cavern, my fear replaced by a strange sense of purpose. The hand of light, the fall through the sand, this magical water, it couldn't be an accident. Something had brought me here for a reason. And as I took my first steps on the cavern floor, my new ability screamed a warning. I wasn't alone in the darkness. The cavern was immense, a vast underground cathedral carved by time and water. But it wasn't empty. My foresight flared, showing me fleeting images of movement in the shadows, shapes that skittered and slithered just beyond the reach of the pond's faint blue light. I heard a sound, a dry, chittering click that echoed off the damp stone walls. It was the sound of something alien, something that didn't belong in any cave on Earth. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my foresight kept me steady, showing me a path to my right, away from the source of the noise. I moved, my feet silent on the rock, guided by flashes of what was to come. I flattened myself behind a massive stalagmite peering into the gloom, and then I saw them. Monsters. There's no other word for it. They were horrific creatures the size of large dogs with chitinous, insect-like bodies. They had leathery, bat-like wings folded against their backs and long, segmented tails that ended in a wicked, scorpion-like stinger dripping with a dark venom. Their heads were a nightmarish blend of insect and reptile, with multiple glowing red eyes and sharp, clicking mandibles. They moved with a predatory grace, their claws scraping against the stone. My blood ran cold. These things were real, and I was trapped in their lair. One of the creatures turned its head in my direction, its red eyes sweeping the darkness. My foresight exploded with warnings. It was going to charge. I saw the leap, the stinger lashing out, the venom striking the rock where my head would be. I didn't hesitate. I ducked and rolled just as the monster launched itself through the air, its stinger smashing into the stone with a sickening crack. The creature shrieked in frustration, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. Its companions turned their heads, their multiple eyes locking onto my position. The hunt was on. I was hopelessly outmatched, but I had one advantage. I knew their every move before they made it. Suddenly, a wave of thirst hit me, sharp and distracting. My new ability seemed to flicker, the visions becoming less clear. I glanced back at the glowing pond, the water. It wasn't just for survival, it fueled my foresight. I needed it. As the monsters closed in, I saw a path, a desperate, reckless plan. I sprinted back toward the water, my future sight showing me exactly where to place my feet to avoid their lunges. I dove back into the pool, gulping down the life-giving, vision-giving liquid. The power surged back, stronger this time. I saw an opening, a narrow fissure in the cavern wall I hadn't noticed before. It was my only way out. I just had to get past a cave full of nightmares to reach it. Escaping that cave was the most terrifying ordeal of my life. It was, a deadly dance, choreographed by my foresight. I dodged and weaved, using the terrain to my advantage, always one step ahead of a snapping jaw or a venomous stinger. The monsters were fast and relentless, but they were predictable. My ability turned their attacks into a script I could read in advance. I finally scrambled through the fissure, tumbling out into a narrow tunnel that sloped upwards. Behind me, the enraged shrieks of the creatures echoed, but they were just too large to follow. I didn't stop running until I saw a sliver of daylight ahead. I burst out onto the desert sand, gasping, not from exhaustion but from sheer unadulterated relief. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dunes. I looked back, but there was no sign of the cave entrance. It was just an unremarkable patch of sand. It was as if the desert itself had hidden the secret away. I felt my canteen at my hip. It was still full, with the glowing water from the cave. But weirdly, I wasn't thirsty. I realized with a jolt that I didn't need regular water anymore. The glowing water from the cavern ponds sustained me. It was a part of me now. I had a permanent source of life and a supernatural power flowing through my veins. I was no longer just Starter, the lost adventurer. I was something else, something more. And I had a story to tell that no one would ever believe. The journey back to civilization was a blur, guided by an uncanny sense of direction that I think was a side effect of my new abilities. I found a caravan trail and, eventually, a small town. From there, it was a series of flights that felt surreal. How could I sit in an airplane seat, watching a bad movie, when I knew that deep beneath the Sahara, monsters were real? When I finally landed back in the United States, the familiar sights and sounds of home felt alien. The world seemed to be moving in slow motion, unaware of the impossible truth I was carrying. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I had to tell my friends. I gathered them at my apartment. Junior, Lacey, Max, and Smoke. They were my family, the people I trusted most in the world. They listened, their expressions shifting from concern to disbelief as I recounted my story. The desert, the thirst, the hand of light, the fall, the glowing water, the foresight, and the monsters. I knew how it sounded. It was the stuff of comic books and cheap sci-fi novels. To prove it, I took out the canteen I had managed to fill before escaping the cave. The water inside pulsed with the same soft, blue light. I told them this water was the source of my power, and that, honestly, I had a feeling this was just the beginning. My friend stared at the glowing canteen on the table. Junior, ever the skeptic, was the first to speak. "Starter buddy, are you sure you didn't just get a bad case of sunstroke?" Lacey, the engineer, was intrigued, her eyes studying the light with scientific curiosity. Max remained silent, his gaze fixed on me, trying to gauge if I was telling the truth. It was Smoke who broke the tension. He leaned forward, a reckless grin on his face. "Monsters, you say? And superpowers from magic water? That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Let me get a sip." Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed the canteen and took a swig. For a moment, nothing happened. Smoke just stood there, smacking his lips. "Tastes like fancy water." Then his eyes went wide. He stumbled back, his hand flying to his head. "Whoa, whoa, Max, you're about to knock over that lamp." A second later, Max, startled by Smoke's outburst, shifted in his seat and his elbow bumped the table lamp, sending it wobbling precariously. He caught it just in time. Everyone stared, speechless. It was real. Lacey was the next one to drink, her scientific curiosity overriding any fear. Then Junior, his skepticism melting away into wide-eyed wonder. Finally, Max took a careful sip. The room buzzed with a strange new energy. We all had it, the foresight. We started testing it, predicting small things. A phone ringing, a car horn outside, the exact moment a pizza delivery guy would knock on the door. It was chaotic and exhilarating. We were no longer just 5 friends. We were a team, bound by an impossible secret and a shared power. We spent the next few days learning to control our abilities, to filter the constant stream of future flashes and focus our intent. Lacey even theorized that the water worked by quantum entanglement, somehow linking our consciousness to near-future events. I didn't understand the science, but I understood the power. But as our control grew, so did the scope of our visions. They weren't just about spilled drinks and pizza deliveries anymore. I started seeing things on a much larger scale, frightening things. I saw fire and smoke rising from cities. I saw panicked crowds running through the streets. And then, I saw the source. A vision hit me with the force of a physical blow. I saw deep space, and a massive, pitted asteroid tumbling toward Earth. But it wasn't just a rock. I could feel a malevolent consciousness inside it, a hive mind of hunger and hate. And I saw it cracking open upon impact, releasing a swarm of the same winged, scorpion-tailed monsters I had fought in the cave. The nightmare was coming to us. The vision left me shaken to my core. This wasn't just about a hidden cave of monsters anymore, this was an invasion, an extinction-level event heading straight for us. My friends saw it too, their own versions of the horrifying future flashing in their minds. The joy of our newfound powers vanished, replaced by a heavy, crushing responsibility. We couldn't just sit on this information. We had to warn someone. We had to warn everyone. The problem was, who would believe a story about alien monsters and magic Foresight water? We'd be dismissed as crackpots, locked away in a padded room while the world hurtled toward disaster. Lacey, ever the pragmatist, came up with the plan. "We can't just tell them the truth," she argued. "We have to show them. We use our foresight to give them information they can't ignore. Unpredictable events, things no intelligence agency could possibly know." It was a brilliant strategy. We pooled our focus, scanning the immediate future for significant, verifiable events. We predicted a sudden stock market fluctuation down to the minute, a freak weather event that wasn't on any forecast, and a minor political scandal in a foreign country. We fed the information anonymously to a trusted journalist contact of Junior's. At first, they were ignored, but then, one by one, our predictions came true. The world's intelligence agencies went into a frenzy. They couldn't explain the leaks. They couldn't trace the source. We had their attention. That's when we made our move. We sent one final anonymous message, requesting a direct meeting with the President of the United States. We gave the exact time and location of a security breach that would happen at a secure facility as proof of our legitimacy. When it happened exactly as we described, the meeting was granted. Standing in the Oval Office, telling the leader of the free world about alien monsters was the most surreal experience of my life. But we had the proof. We predicted the president's next words, a Secret Service agent's coffee spill, and the exact moment a bird would hit the window. They finally believed us. Not the part about the magic water, we kept that detail to ourselves, but they believed our foresight was real. And if we were right about the small things, they had to assume we were right about the big one, the asteroid. A global effort began, unlike anything the world had ever seen. Under the guise of a newly discovered rogue asteroid threat, nations mobilized. Resources were poured into planetary defense. Evacuation plans were drawn up for major cities. We worked with military strategists, our foresight providing an unbelievable tactical advantage, helping them plan for a battle against an enemy. We were the only ones who truly understood the world was preparing for a rock. We were preparing for monsters. The day came, just as our visions had foretold. The asteroid, designated Nemesis by astronomers, entered the atmosphere, blazing a trail of fire across the sky. Global defense systems, missiles, and experimental laser cannons developed with our guidance, launched in a coordinated barrage. They struck the asteroid, shattering it into thousands of smaller pieces. On screens around the world, people cheered. They thought the danger had passed. But we knew better. Breaking it up wasn't the point, it was a delivery system. The fragments, now too numerous to track, rained down across the globe, a shotgun blast from space, and each fragment was an egg. The impacts were devastating. The fragments crashed into cities, forests, and oceans. But the real horror began when they cracked open. From the smoking craters crawled the same creatures I had faced in the Sahara, but these were bigger, more ferocious. They swarmed out, a tide of black chitin and glowing red eyes, and began to attack. The world's armies were prepared for a natural disaster, not a biological invasion. Their weapons were effective against the creatures, but their tactics were all wrong. The monsters were intelligent, coordinated, and utterly merciless. Chaos erupted. Cities became war zones. The initial defense crumbled. From the largest fragment, which crashed into the remote wilderness of Siberia, something else emerged. It was a leader, a queen, a creature 10 times the size of the others, a monstrous beast of terrifying intelligence and power. We could feel its psychic presence, a wave of pure malice that washed over the globe, directing its brood. This was the mind I had sensed in the vision. It was the heart of the swarm, and as long as it lived, the monsters would never stop. Our team, now working from a global command center, knew we had to act. Conventional warfare wasn't enough. We were the only ones who could get close. Our journey to the final confrontation began. We weren't soldiers, but our foresight made us the most valuable assets on the planet. We guided elite military units through monster-infested territory, our abilities allowing us to anticipate ambushes and find safe paths. We saw every pounce, every slash, every venomous strike before it happened. We became legends on the battlefield, the Foresight 5, ghosts who moved through the chaos untouched. But with every step closer to the leader's crater, the psychic pressure grew stronger, and our visions became clouded with images of death and destruction. We knew that this journey would demand a price and that not all of us would be coming back. The crater in Siberia was a scene from hell. The ground was scorched and twisted, and the air hummed with a malevolent energy that made our teeth ache. Thousands of the creatures swarmed around a central pulsating nest where the leader creature resided. A direct assault was suicide. We needed a diversion. Smoke, always the reckless one, stepped forward. "I'll draw them off," he said, a grim look in his eyes. "You guys go for the big one." Before we could argue, he took off, using his foresight to create a chaotic, unpredictable path, firing his weapon and yelling, drawing the attention of a massive portion of the swarm. It was a heroic, insane act, and it gave us the opening we needed. As Junior, Lacey, Max, and I raced toward the nest, the leader creature emerged. It was a titan of nightmares, its armored carapace deflecting military-grade munitions with ease. Its psychic scream tore at our minds, trying to overwhelm our foresight with visions of our own deaths. But we held firm, our minds linked, our shared power creating a shield against its mental assault. The final battle began. Lacey used her foresight to identify structural weaknesses in the creature's armor, calling them out so Junior and Max could concentrate their fire. I moved in close, a blur of motion, my own attacks guided by perfect split-second precognition. The fight was brutal. The leader was powerful, its attacks devastating, but we were always a step ahead. We were a perfectly coordinated unit, moving and fighting as one. But the creature was intelligent. It began to adapt, its movements becoming more erratic, trying to break our predictive rhythm. It focused its rage on me. It knew I was the linchpin. It lunged faster than anything I had foreseen. In that instant, my vision split. I saw two futures, one where I dodged, and my friends were caught in the creature's devastating counterattack. The other was my own end. The choice was clear. There was no other way. With my final breath, I plunged my weapon deep into the creature's exposed throat. Its stinger, a massive spear of sharpened chitin, pierced through my chest at the same moment, a searing pain, and then nothing. I saw one last vision as my life faded, the leader creature collapsing, its psychic command over the swarm severed. I saw the remaining monsters falling into confusion. I saw my friends, their faces etched with grief and shock, fighting on with renewed fury. And I saw Smoke, returning from his diversion, a one-man army carving a path through the disoriented creatures to rejoin the fight. My sacrifice had not been in vain. The battle was won. I closed my eyes, and the vision stopped forever. My friends would carry on. They would save everyone. The world felt impossibly still after Starter fell. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was the quiet thrum of loss in my chest, a silence deeper than the psychic screams that had filled the air moments before. The leader lay dead at my feet, its monstrous form twitching in its final spasms, but none of us moved to celebrate. Instead, we stood in the scorched crater, the smoke of battle curling around us, and felt the weight of what Starter had given. The swarm, once unified in terrifying purpose, broke apart like a wave hitting rocks. Without their master's mind to guide them, the creatures scattered in confusion, some collapsing, others fleeing into the Siberian night. Smoke rejoined us, battered and bloodied, his face streaked with tears and grime. For a long moment, the four of us, Lacey, Max, Smoke, and I, just stood there, staring at the place where Starter had fallen. I knelt beside my brother's body. He looked peaceful, as if he were only sleeping, but the wound was unmistakable. The world would never be the same. We built a pyre from the twisted debris of the battlefield, our hands moving automatically as we prepared to say goodbye. Lacey placed Starter's lucky charm, a battered coin, on his chest. Max muttered a quiet prayer under his breath. Smoke simply saluted, his jaw clenched tight. As the flames rose, we made a promise. Starter's sacrifice would not be forgotten. We would share his story with the world, so no one would ever forget the cost of victory. We would rebuild, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who could not fight, for everyone who had lost someone. Dawn broke over the ruined horizon, painting the sky with gold and crimson. In that light, hope felt possible again. We walked away from the crater, A little more broken, but still together. The world had changed forever, but so had we. Starter gave us a future. Now it was up to us to live it. In the weeks that followed, the world seemed to hold its breath. News of Starter's sacrifice, and the mysterious water he left behind, spread across continents, whispered in hushed voices, and broadcast through trembling signals. Survivors emerged from the shadows drawn by the promise of something better, and by rumors of a power that could help them rebuild. Where there had once been only fear, now there was a fragile hope taking root, nourished by the water, and by the visions it granted. We became unlikely leaders, entrusted with the water and the foresight it brought, guiding those who had lost everything towards the broken skeletons of cities. Together, we cleared rubble, built shelters, and mapped out the beginnings of a new society, using our visions to avoid danger and make wise choices. The old world scars were everywhere: twisted metal, burned earth, the silence of streets that would never echo with laughter again. But in small ways, life returned. Children planted seeds in the blackened soil, their hands dirty but determined, the water helping new life push through the ash. Lacey taught them to listen for the quiet signs of healing, the first shoots of green, the distant cry of a bird, the laughter that slipped through when no one was looking. She used her foresight to guide them to the safest places to plant. Max organized teams to purify water and restore power, his calm voice a steady beacon. He used his visions to predict which repairs would hold, and who could be trusted with the water's gift. Smoke patrolled the perimeter, fierce as ever, but softer now with the young ones trailing at his heels, always alert for threats, guided by the subtle warnings the water sometimes brought. As for me, I wrote, I told Starter's story, his courage, his flaws, the impossible choice he made to share the water, and the responsibility that came with it. I spoke to crowds gathered around flickering lanterns, and to lone survivors huddled in the dark, explaining why we could not give the water to everyone, and how we chose those who would use it wisely. With every word, I felt him beside me, urging me on, reminding me that hope must be protected as carefully as the water itself. We didn't rebuild the world Starter saved in a day, or even a year. But every morning, as the sun rose over our battered home, I remembered the promise we made in the ashes, to use the water and our visions for good, and to choose our successors with care. This was only the beginning. From loss came hope, and from hope, responsibility. From hope, a future, one we shaped with every careful decision, every drop of water, every vision shared. And so we carried on, Starter's legacy alive in every step, every seed, every dawn, and in every choice to protect the gift he left behind. In the quiet that followed, I found myself wandering the edge of our new world, reflecting on the gift of water and foresight that Starter left behind. Some days, the responsibility felt heavier than the cold. Other days, hope shimmered in the ruins, bold and bright as ever. Time moved on, and so did we, but the legacy of the water lingered, woven into our days like threads of silver in the seams of our lives. We chose to share it, not just for ourselves but for everyone who would help shape the future. We recorded the names of those entrusted with the water, etched deep so their choices would outlast the storms. The story of the water became a lesson for the children, a song sung at dusk, a promise we whispered to the stars. We would use it wisely. Each year, on the day the sky fell, we gathered beneath the old twisted tree, the only one to survive the fire. We shared stories, laughter, and tears. We planted seeds, not just in the earth but in each other, passing on the water and foresight to those who would nurture it. Starter's wisdom taught us that hope is not the absence of fear, but the will to move forward and choose wisely for those who come after. As I look around at the faces illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns, I realize Starter's true legacy. It isn't just in the world he saved, but in the careful choices we make to ensure a hopeful future. We are the long memory that carries him forward. We are the seeds of tomorrow, growing stronger with every sunrise. And as dawn breaks once more, I know, wherever he is, Starter is proud. The story continues, and we, the survivors, are its authors now, guardians of the water and of hope.